Hello and welcome to Skeindeer Knits. My name is Ellie and I am a Norwegian living and knitting in London. And you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Skeindeer, and there is the Ravelry group Skeindeer Knits, which I always encourage you to join because it is the best group where you can find out all about all the knit-alongs that I am hosting. But I'm going to briefly cover the knit-alongs that I'm hosting right here, right now. I'm hosting the Marius knit-along. This is the Marius pattern. There is a knit-along for jumpers, sweaters, cardigans, etc. that we are knitting together in that pattern. More info on that in that topic. And I've also made a bundle of eligible patterns in my favorites on Ravelry. I am also hosting the Serbu Club, the Serbu Mitten Club. It is kind of / was a subscription club. You can of course still buy it, but all the patterns are now out, so there's no subscription. It's literally just a ebook publication, if you will, a collection of mitten patterns, and I think I will talk more about that in this episode if there is time for it. And yeah, that is probably what's drawn a bunch of you here to this podcast, because I feel like that's like my origin story. And yeah, the Mitten Club is concluding at the end of the year, and that just leaves me a whole year to think about the next Mitten Club. And I am also hosting a mystery knit-along where the mystery bit is over but the knit-along bit is not. And I thought I would just jump right into finished objects from that, because that is basically what I want to say about this mystery knit. So this was a mystery knit-along that started in the end of November, and it was for a pair of colorwork mittens. And each clue has now come out. The last one was in the beginning of December. It's very soft chop, because I wanted to give people the opportunity to finish these to wear during Christmas, but I also wanted to give people the opportunity to knit at their own pace. So yeah, you can still knit them. You're still eligible for the knit-along. It does not end until this year ends. So I'm actually having 2 knit-alongs that are concluding at New Year's Eve. So instead of being out celebrating, I guess I'll just be sitting on Ravelry closing threads and whatnot. Anyway, I thought I would show you the mittens, because that is my finished object, because I have been knitting these mittens along with you. So I knitted 2 colorways, and there's one colorway that I decided to finish alongside you guys. And I have already shown you, so I'm going to show the mittens. You look away if you don't want to see it, but presumably you are okay with that now because you're so far in. This is the mitten. This is blocked, it's finished, everything here is done. And I thought, oh my god, I need to finish the other mitten and block it in time for recording the podcast this morning. I sat up late, knitted and finished the mitten, and thought, you know what, I'm not going to block it, I'm not going to finish it. I'm going to show you the difference between before and after blocking, because I think that can be more informative than just kind of showing off how neat it is when it's blocked. So this is before blocking. And first of all, this is so much more stiff. I mean, if you can like just see the difference here, like I don't know if this makes sense. I can feel like this is so much more denser than this. The other difference, which may or may not be obvious to you, is the size. Just kind of like have them overlap. That is quite a remarkable difference, and obviously I can't promise anything, but in my experience this thing will block out to be that size. So this is how I kind of go by when I find my size, because like I emphasize gauge a lot, because if you get gauge wrong, you get the size wrong. No matter what you feel about gauge, that is the case. But I generally don't tell people to swatch for accessories, because seriously, they're accessories. Like, you can just knit a swatch that becomes your accessory. So why would you do a separate swatch? Like, you can just start knitting the mitten and see if they fit. So what you can do then is basically try it on as you knit it, and if the cuff is just snug enough for you to get on, just snug enough, and it's it, and it's good. If the mitten fits just right, like it's literally just like around your fingers here, not any smaller than it needs to be, it's good. Because when you block it out, you will get to block it out to have a lot more wriggle room. So see, a lot more wriggle room in here than in here. This is a bit tight, this is not. So this one fits just right, so that's kind of how I know that it fits, and I thought that would be useful. But the main reason I'm showing you this is just to kind of lift everyone's confidence a bit, because they don't look nice when they're unblocked. Just give you a close-up. It's uneven, it's bulky, the window frame is puckering. Like, it's still nice. I'm happy with this. I'd be happy with this if I never knew what blocking was, because a year ago I didn't. But you can see the light is kind of working in my favor, I think. So you can see the idea. It's not as neat as this thing, which looks like it's been, you know, ironed almost, you know. So hopefully that was a nice comparison. You can definitely see on the side where it's pulling in, where there's more colorwork and stuff. So this stuff just evens out with blocking, and when I block I cut out a piece of foam board. I literally put this mitten on the foam board, I line around and I give maybe between a half to a whole inch of extra room, and then I trim it down until I can just fit the mitten over, and that's when I know it's good. I was really cold before I started recording this. I was just dressing up, but it got very hot as soon as I got that new studio lamp of mine on, because I couldn't rely on the daylight during the winter. I tried last year, it was miserable, but it got really hot now, so I'm just going to take my lovely winter shawl off. But I'm happy to show you to you because it's really one of my favorite knits of the year, which I think I need to do an episode of that, favorite knits of the year, or all knits of the year. It's the winter shawl by Pinneguri. It's huge, it has the best shape ever. I just want to knit all the shawls in this shape now. So, but yeah, it's a winter shawl, so it's quite warm, and it's made in Brooklyn Tweed Loft, which is just the best. Anyway, the other thing that I am wearing is the owl sweater, and the thing that is so remarkable about this sweater, aside from the fact that I never wove in the ends, I put the buttons on the owl eyes to make the owl eyes, is that this is my first ever jumper. It's not the first that I cast on, because I actually cast on the dress, but obviously that took a lot longer to finish. I didn't really know what I was doing, because pattern schmattern, I found the owl sweater pattern by Kate Davies. I knitted that, and yeah, it fits super well. I have changed size a lot since both in terms of losing and gaining and so on after I made this thing, and it still fits really well. I don't know what it is about this sweater, but it just fits incredibly well despite what size I seem to end up having, and yeah, I just love it. And the funny thing about this sweater is that I didn't always love it. After I made it, I found it very, very, very prickly, and it is. So I knitted it again in Stippwash Merino, and it was quite frankly a disaster. I loved wearing it, it's lovely soft, but it's got no shape, no hold. It's kind of a bit see-through, though that was kind of on my part because I chose a slightly thinner yarn. But this one is more generous on the meterage, so it actually weighs less. And if you hold the yarns together, they look like they're of equal thickness, but because this is a lofty, sticky, rustic yarn, it doesn't matter. It fills in the gaps. It can be lighter, it can be knit looser. Yeah, I just learned a lot about that kind of yarn with that experiment, even though it was a lot of denial and a love. But I want the yarn that isn't itchy, and it is itchy here. I should have worn maybe a thin cotton shirt underneath, because right here it is a bit prickly, but I mean, I'm not turning red, even though I actually just scratched myself now, like just now. I think a nice thin cotton undershirt would be fine. Yeah, I think this is really good. It's Cascade Eco. You know, the things that you can get like as real big skeins, they're huge. I would quite like to make more jumpers out of that. I think it's excellent, and you can make some really quick knits, because I think the gauge in this thing is like 13 to 14 stitches or something for 10 centimeters or 4 inches, which is nuts. So yeah, very quick knit. Yeah, got nothing bad to say about this. The fit of it is excellent. I love Kate Davies patterns, as the long-term viewers will know, so I can only recommend it, and I can recommend it in this yarn. Just beware that, you know, it's not an extra skin for this area. I'm okay with the sleeves. It's right next to my skin on my sleeves and arms. No. You know what I mean? It's fine. That's what I'm trying to say. So since we've covered one finished object, I thought we'd cover something I still haven't finished, but I just wanted to thank you guys so much for how this pattern was received. It has literally, no, it has not literally blown my mind, that would be awful, but it has blown my mind, figuratively speaking, and I don't know what to say. Here's the thing, and the first day it was trending on Ravelry. I think it trended for at least a couple of days. It was in the top 20 and it stayed in the top 30 for a very long time. So first page pattern, which is just nuts. But here's the thing that makes it all the more amazing, is that anyone who has a Ravelry pattern shop will know this. You can just easily click the pattern and see all the list of people that purchased it, and you can very quickly see what discount codes they have used. It's very salient visually, and nearly all of the purchasers use the discount code, which means that huge reception that made this pattern trend on Ravelry was because of you guys. Because you guys are the people that I gave that code on here and on Instagram. And so you guys kind of brought my pattern up there and out into the world, and thank you. That's really nice. I have had a couple of mind-blowing days, and like the day after I went into a local yarn shop where the staff there congratulated me on the new pattern. I'm like, I didn't even know you guys paid attention. That's like super cool. So yeah, figuratively speaking, my mind is blown. So I'm just gonna hold up the pattern again, remind you that it's out there. I don't know if the discount code is valid anymore because I always give them really arbitrary deadlines because they shouldn't really be predictable and I don't remember, so you might want to have a go at it. It's mentioned in the last episode and on my Instagram post, so I'm gonna have to design more socks in this yarn because I am in love with Tuki wool sock yarn and there just aren't enough patterns for it out there, and it's an excellent sport weight sock yarn. I do want to say though, if you are gonna knit them and you find that maybe you don't want socks that dense, you can use just about any sock yarn, and you can use thinner rustic yarns like Ovis, etc. And I know there's a Canadian mill that has a yarn that I actually bought in Canada, I just don't remember the name. They have rustic sock yarn in fingering weight, and I think John Arben does some. Muse of Colours from Norway/Sweden. They're always sources, but you don't need rustic yarn. Like, it's knitted so dense anyway that I wouldn't worry. And I have written that I don't recommend this yarn for the smaller sizes because the smaller sizes are knitted at an even tighter gauge, because that's pretty much the only way you can adjust colorwork patterns unless you want to change the chart for every size, which is kind of going to mess up these socks. And it totally works, don't worry. But you might find that the Tuki wool sport weight sock yarn is a bit too dense. You're free to try. I'd be interested to hear if you do find that it's okay. But I generally recommended using some finer yarn for it, just in case. It depends how dense you want it, really. You can knit this kind of yarn pretty dense, but you know, you don't want to mess up your hands too much. But the main thing that I wanted to say after all my waffling and babbling is something that we touched upon earlier with the Color Your World socks that I released in March. Is kind of, a lot of people have this sort of realization moment that there are so many more stitches. Generally, personally, I prefer between 68 to 72 stitches for colorwork socks, and that just made people go, that's a lot of stitches. I don't have that big feet, and that's like not really the point, because I mean, when I knit stockinette kind of vanilla socks, which I have dabbled into, which we'll touch on in a bit, I tend to go with 60 stitches, it seems. I am aware you can go lower, but I would personally not be comfortable with the loose gauge I will have to do to make that fit my feet. Plus I have a lot of layers on my feet. So you can imagine there's a huge difference for my foot size to go from 60 stitches up to 72. This is for the same feet, okay? And sometimes I even knit my colorwork socks at a looser gauge than my stockinette socks, because there is some extra security with using 2 strands. But also the main reason why this is so different is not because I always need to make my colorwork socks into bed socks, it's because the strands, the floats, they completely eliminates the idea of negative ease. You cannot and should not have negative ease in colorwork socks. You can have no ease to positive ease. I would actually recommend having a bit of positive ease. And the way I solve this, I don't know if I have any good examples around me, but I have started knitting some socks and I'll get to that in a bit. But I'll try speaking about this a bit abstractly for now. If I start with a leg, or actually let's start with the toe, because this is a toe up pattern, I will go with the small needle size that I think I need. I have a rough estimate about what kind of needle size I need for my gauge. So I go for the smaller one of the two, so I get a very tight fitted toe, because the toe gets a lot of wear and tear, so that is important. And then I can try it on, see if I maybe need to loosen up for the rest of the foot, because the foot gets a bit wider right after the toes. But you can generally knit that foot part as tight as can be while it still fits, and you can try it on to find out. The reason being is because you never have to pull all those floats over your heel. This is just for your foot, and that is why I made a toe up pattern. So just make it tight but not negative ease. just tight as it needs to be. There's not so much growth in it when it's color work because the float kind of contains it a bit, so you're not going to get the same kind of growth that you get in vanilla socks. I say that with very limited experience of vanilla socks, but I've talked to a lot of people that do vanilla socks, and I can speak for colorwork socks, which is more my thing. So that is what I do up until the heel, and with the heel I will still stick to a small-ish needle size. So small for me is 2.75, but you know, tight knitter, I will stick to the same small size that I use for the foot. Relative to what I then change to for the leg, because the leg has to be pulled over the heel, and that is when you kind of need to take into account the floats, and that is where all those stitches come in as well, because you really just need to make sure that leg is going to fit over your heel. And if you find that the leg does not fit over your heel, it doesn't mean you have to rip all the way back. Just rip back down to the leg and maybe go up a needle size and see if that helps. So hopefully that does help. That is generally how I knit my socks. I manipulate the needle size a lot. I've not written that into the pattern because that is so subjective. It totally depends on your feet and your legs. For me, it's because my legs are a great deal wider than my feet. So for me to actually knit the leg with the same stitch count and gauge and needle size as my foot is just a bit weird. So I tend to go up and widen it by, yeah, manipulating the gauge a little bit, and I'll get to that with one of my works in progress as well. The other thing I wanted to thank you all for was your amazing congratulations and encouragement for my published pattern. I published a mitten pattern in the Norwegian magazine Bladet Garn. I do not have this current issue of Bladet Garn because it's waiting for me in Norway, where I am going on Friday, but I do have the previous 3 issues. So this is the first issue, this is the second, and this is the third, because that's a totally logical order to have them in. It's an excellent Norwegian magazine. It's probably the only Norwegian magazine that focuses on indie makers, on, I want to say, what is modern in Norwegian knitting, as opposed to pretty much all the other Norwegian knitting we have. I think it is an excellent magazine, and so therefore I am incredibly stupidly proud to be in it. I'm just like all oogie of excitement, and it just kind of warms my heart and gets me all the more excited when people tell me that I've actually bought the magazine because I am in it, even though they don't read Norwegian. And to that I want to say, first of all, thank you. That is so flattering. That sounds a bit... There aren't any bigger words, so that's just what I'm going to stick to. But I do want to say that you're onto something, because if you have knitted any of my mitten patterns before, I'm sure you now, by now, you have gotten to the skill level where you can just look at my charts and work from that. The cuff is a bit of a different one, but I think if you look at the photos you can probably figure that one out as well. It's kind of a ribbon garter mashup, is what I'm gonna say. I think you can work it out. So yeah, I'm just so excited to peer into that magazine when I get home. And of course the other thing is to thank you all for how well the Serbu mitten Kvello has been released. So Kvello is the 4th and final mystery mitten from this club. It's not a mystery knit, it's just like a pattern that was released as a surprise. Although obviously you knew it was coming. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just wanted to thank you for seemingly liking it as much as I do, because I'm very proud of this pattern. It was my favorite from the club, and so I saved it for last because we need to have something very, very nice this time of year because it's dark and miserable. So thank you all for all the kind words. So I think it's time to look at some other finished objects, and that is my very first and probably not even last vanilla socks. It's a bit funny, like the story behind this podcast was me kind of suddenly consuming all the knitting podcasts. I just kind of lived in a black hole under a rock in the woods, far away from anyone, and not knowing that this existed, and suddenly I just discovered them all at once and realized quickly that I didn't feel that represented. I felt like it was just all shawls and vanilla socks and hand-dyed yarns, and I'm like, that's just not what I knit usually. I don't really see my knitting here and what I thought was normal knitting, which I guess it wasn't. But part of the quest of this podcast wasn't just to kind of bring about my style of knitting and making all the other people do all the colorwork mittens, which I think, you know, we can tick that one off the list. It was also for me to look into what other people were knitting, and so last year was definitely the year of the, or this year I should say, and also last year was the year of the shawls. I really tried out a lot of shawls. There's a layer of shawls around this chair. We got this Bright Sven by Helen Stewart under here, and I tried out some Stephen West as well, though I didn't finish. But yeah, generally I dabbled hardcore, and now I've tried out vanilla socks, self-striping yarns even, and that is my finished object. Have I put it on sock blocker? No, because just why, you know, I can show you this way, that works too. Sock blockers aren't really that necessary, especially not for vanilla socks, if I may say so. I do find them necessary for my colorwork socks, but they weren't really before I actually bought them, you know. I had a bunch of colorwork socks that I never blocked. They were fine. But yeah, this is my new vanilla socks. They are in the Time Traveler colorway by Knit Picks. I did something weird here that made this work. Don't ask me why, but I'm thankful. It's a miracle, hallelujah, etc. And I managed to do them both, which is just nuts. So they got little colored toes, and but here's the thing, and I think I covered on this last episode as well, so I'm only going to tell you the story briefly. I knitted these really long, right up to my knees, as long as the skeins will allow me. And then I did it with the other sock, and the other sock had a join, and the join then striped in the opposite direction, so that I would get like yellow stripe, red stripe, yellow stripe, white stripe, you know. So I fiddled with this a lot, borrowed from the other skein. I just ended up with a lot of joins and not enough yarn for either. And then as I knitted it further up my leg, it was too tight, even though I had gone up needle sizes and done some increases. It just wasn't working out, so I ripped out, ripped down, and now it fits. And they're actually not as long as they look. They really just go kind of mid-calf, actually. Once this width is kind of pulled out, that's how far they go, and I'm pretty happy with that. And I have tried vanilla socks. It's a bit of an identity crisis, but I can deal with that. I think it's been fun. I understand the sort of self-striping effect, you know, where you just want to get to the next stripe and the next stripe, and the Knit Pick stripes are just like fat enough that you actually get to work quite a big chunk during this kind of obsession of getting to the next stripe and the next stripe and the next stripe. Which really just makes these fly off the needles. So I might do some Knit Picks again. And I have to say, at this gauge, this yarn does seem a lot stronger than it did in the skein, because the skeins are very loosely wound, and so they just seem a bit limp, and it made me doubt the quality of the yarn a bit. And I have to say, it did peel up a little bit as I just tried the socks on as I was knitting it. So I'm bit concerned how it will handling, but it does seem a lot stronger now. It's actually knitted up and knitted fairly tight. For me, 2.5 is like tight to Rauma, you know, it's so tight, but I know for others that's like their looser like needle size, because we all knit differently. And if there's one thing I want to like convey to the knitting world, is that needle size mean nothing, and it means everything. That's like the one thing I wish everybody knew, I think. I'll get to that at some point. A long ranty rambly rant, I'm sure. But yeah, finished object. Something to put in my box of socks. I am 7 pairs in, and there's supposed to be 12. But the good news is that all the other pairs are actually on the needles. But before we get to that, I thought I could tell you a little bit about some other finished object I have, and that is a hat. I, for some reason, got it into my head that I should design a cabled hat for a friend of mine for Christmas, and so I did. And this is the hat. It's done. It's got cables, and I keep forgetting the name of the sideway braid. It's a lateral braid, I think it is. It's a pretty neat feature. Just give you a close-up of the hat. It is a little bit small, but bear in mind that my head is huge, and I don't think my friend's head is that huge. Plus, it doesn't really have much hair, so if it fits me this well, I think he'll be all right. Yeah. So I'm gonna try to give that to him. We'll see if he ever wears it, but you know, we can only hope. It kind of slips up for me because it is a bit snug and my hair is very slick. We're kind of just hoping that doesn't happen for him, and maybe I will weave in the end before I wrap it in, because that would be a decent thing to do. So my design, you guys, I designed a cable hat. I don't know, is anyone interested in a pattern? I might, if I publish it, I might publish a few altogether because I feel like I could do that. So yeah, cable hat. So now I would like to look into some works in progress. I think I will save more sock rambly rants at the end, so there'll be more of that, but for now just look at some things I have been working on, because I've been bitten by the garment bug again. That tends to happen, and then so halfway through the garment I'm like, oh, but there's another sweater I could knit, and so I do that. But this is a sweater I've been working on quite with a love, eager and enthusiasm, and it's the Lady Marple cardigan. I haven't worked on it the past few days just because I've been bogged down with marking, which I finally finished like literally just before I hit record. And here's the Lady Marple. It looks just like last time, but it is a lot longer. You're just gonna have to believe me. I wonder if I'm at the point now where I actually get to divide from like the sleeves, so I make a hole here. Because if I do cropped, actually that's not too far-fetched, but I want to measure and compare with some cardigans I already have and see what I want. Maybe it needs to be like just 2 inches longer or 1 inch. I don't know inches. Why do I keep talking inches? 3 centimeters longer might be the best way to go about it. Anyway, this is what we have. It's made in the Gilead yarn, and I love the Gilead yarn and any of the other weights in the Natura yarn, and it's just amazing. I have nothing bad to say about this yarn. Yes, sure, I might have preferred it being a bit more sticky, so I'd perhaps feel a bit more confident in sticking this without sewing, but I think instead I'll just get my mom to fetch the sewing machine and do that. And then other than that, it's just perfect. It seems durable, very pill resistant. It's lofty, but it's quite thick, and you can knit at various gauges as various weights. I mean, the red is just radiant. I could talk about this yarn for a long time, and I'm sure I will for the coming episodes, because this is the thing we will be seeing again and again and again. So yeah, I mentioned a bunch of modifications I did in the last episode, so if you're curious about that, you can go back there. But one of the main things is, of course, that this is not to be sticked. It is a cardigan that's knit flat with knitting and purling, and yeah, like I said last time, I just feel like everybody needs to get on this thing because it's just so, what do you say, potato chippy? This is definitely that. This is just all, this is like, you know, in the dictionary where it says potato chippy, maybe like Urban Dictionary, there's a photo of this cardigan, you know, it's that. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna put it down now. And another garment work in progress, which I've actually so conveniently put on spare cables now, so I can actually show you it in full. That is the Improv sweater slash cardigan by the French Association, because they'd basically given the world a recipe, a free recipe for how to make a raglan that fits you. It was supposed to be for the Dagny dress, which is a Norwegian pattern that you can only get if you get the kit, which I did, but I don't think I'll be using that pattern whatsoever in the end. There's nothing about this that resembles that sweater. I thought for a while that I was using the gauge of the pattern. I was like, oh my god, the pattern says 17 stitch gauge and I can only hit 16 or 18, so I went with 18, but the pattern says 16. So I am knitting it a bit tight, but that's why I put this on cables to actually try it on, and this is what we get. That's fine, it's no problem whatsoever. And I don't think this yarn held double, which it is problematic at an 18 stitch gauge, and it seems to fit really well. I need to knit a couple more rows before I divide it for sleeve and body, and I do know that I need more stitches for the body anyway. The slight big conundrum is, if I was to follow the Dagny pattern, I'd have too many stitches for the sleeves already, but I still don't have enough stitches for the body. So that is a bit of a something. So I guess I could keep increasing on the body side and just not increase for the sleeve side and still knit the sleeves in the whole round before I divide, right? That's the thing I can do. Sounds doable. And I think I will actually go up a needle size, because I don't want the whole thing to be denser than it needs to be. I think it's fine for the shoulders to be, because the shoulder is the thing that carries the whole weight, the whole garment. So for the shoulder to be knit tighter, I like that idea, and then just get it a bit lighter as I go, a bit like the Birkin sweater in a way, because This is the bit that really needs to be durable, and for the other bits to be knit at the recommended gauge of the pattern I am not using. That can't be a wrong thing. So this is the yarn. It's the Pickles tweed, merino tweed to be specific. It's 2 strands of non-superwash single ply merino with tweed. It is suspiciously similar to the Debbie Bliss Donegal tweed, fine Donegal tweed with a bit of cashmere in it. I don't know why they look the same to me, but this doesn't have cashmere, so it's not the same. And here I'm dropping stitches. What do you know? So yeah, I don't think I'll be ripping out anything just because I am off gauge, because I can just go up in needle size as I go along, and we'll see what happens with this. The neck hole might be a bit small, but you know what? I can live with that. It'll probably get wider anyway. I mean, I'm saying it might be too small because I have yet to do the rib for the neckline, and that might be when it becomes a problem. But you know, I'm wearing this thing to keep me warm, and so it needs a tight neckline. I think it'll be fine. Speaking of these kinds of things I've been touching upon in this episode with regards to gauge, needle size, yarn weight, I have an idea for a knit along in February. Yes, I know I said I will be starting the year-long knit along in January, but I thought we'd do a very small knit along in February when I am back from busy land, because I have a lot of January plans that I have not yet announced, and I will. But yeah, I just feel a bit foolish for having planned these things, but it will be pretty fun. So for February, but I just want to hear you guys, kind of your thoughts about this. I want to call, and this might be a series, but for now it's going to just have one rule, and I call it the break the rules knit along, the break the rules cow, because I want people to stop following the rules. I know the big process about learning how to knit is learning the rules. You need to learn you know, what gauge and needle size and yarn weights go together, and that you can substitute within each yarn weight, yada yada. All that is well good, it's fine, you can look it up, it's like pretty straightforward, albeit it takes a while to kind of work into your memory. But when you have reached that point, don't get stuck at that point. Don't always think that you need to use DK weight yarn for a DK weight sweater. What if you use worsted? What if you use Aran? What if you use fingering? That is what I want the break the rules cal to be, and I want to do this in February because it's a very short month. I will have no rules whatsoever about the size of the project, about when or whether you finish. I literally want people to just try this out, to experiment, to not alter the pattern but alter your materials for it. So I've got lots of examples where I've gone with fingering weight yarn for a DK weight sweater, where I went with lace weight yarn for my fingering weight mittens the other time, you know, with the Way Through the Woods mittens. And you can generally do these things if you use woolen spun lofty sticky yarns, because they are a lot more forgiving. You know, I was talking about the sweater and how it allowed for a looser weight, a looser gauge than the superwash merino did. So this is an idea I have that we can just kind of do as a sort of a nerdy experiment together that has no restrictions on whips, whether you finish, how big it is. Literally all I want you to do is to break the rule about yarn weight. You take a pattern, I recommend a weight, and you use a different weight. And I do want to encourage you to choose a different weight that is not just next to the neighbouring weight. You know, replacing DK with worsted isn't that outrageous. Replacing DK with Aran, that's a bit interesting, you know. Just check that, you know, it works with the gauge, swatch with it, make sure that it's a fabric you want. That's the main thing, that's the main point of this. I don't want you to change the pattern, I want you to see if a different yarn can give you a fabric that you prefer instead. But this is just an idea I have for knit along. I don't know if it's going to happen. I will kind of test if any one of you are interested. It's a thing that kind of nerd around in the Ravelry group together. I think it could be really fun and educational, and you're allowed to make mistakes. Like I said, no finishing date, but I'm talking as if this is going to happen. I will do it if you guys want to do it. Now, I've been saying that I have my other box of socks on the needles, and I'm sure some are thinking, let me see, you have the Blue Rose stockings, you have the Cerberus socks, you have the Transcendent socks. and well, I've cast on a couple of socks, alright. I've cast on the Santa's Workshop colorway by Critium Handmade. I'm really loving how this thing is working up. I know what's happening to me, the whole self-striping thing. It's I have joined the dark side, you guys, but I made you guys join my dark side, so we're even. And yeah, this is the sock that is striping up as I am traveling on the train and working essays and what have you. So isn't that just the best colorway combination? I don't even know what this is. I just know that it makes me feel very festive, and I don't know why, because it's just literally just the red that is actually a Christmas color for me. But for some reason the combination of these colors makes me go, ooh, Christmas, Christmas, Christmas. You know what I mean? I don't know. So yeah, it's called Santa's Workshop. I'm just gonna knit, 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 knit until I have some kind of length that I want and fit. And yes, these were toe up and this is cuff down, because you gotta try both. And I think, like I said earlier, if I do it cuff down, I can actually try Becky Sorensen's New Depth heel a bit better, because I don't have to kind of think, oh, but the gusset stitches would take that many rows, and then I need to like start it that much ahead of the gusset and the heel, and then it's just like, it's a bit more mindless if I can do it from here, because I don't have to kind of consider that so much. That didn't make any sense. We'll see if it works out when I've tried it. Yeah. So I had a huge conundrum though with the cuff, because I kept casting on it. It wasn't tight enough, and no, it wasn't loose enough, and it just wasn't working. So I did two things. I cast on 72 stitches. Yes, my colorwork socks stitch count. What? So I did that, and I did that with the 3mm needles, I think. Either that or just the loose handle. Maybe I just kind of loosened up a bit. And then I knit the rib on my 2.5mm needles that I use for my tension. Don't just copy my needle size just because I say I do, if you don't knit as tight as I do. And I did that, knitted the rib, and then on the last round, the first round on stockinette I should say, I just knitted the kind of redundant stitches together, which I kind of did for the pearl columns. You can see it looks a bit funny there, where I kind of scooped them together. So then I'm back to my 60 stitches. And that has worked out really well. I have a nice big cuff for my legs that fits, and I can just keep knitting and stockinette on my 60 stitches now. And then I will do the New Depth heel and increase back to roughly, say, half of 72 stitches, or maybe like just half of 70 stitches. So I have 35, something like that. Whatever happens, whatever comes up, I think I'll do half of 72. Seems to add up, given that I'm working with even numbers, so you can really only increase by 2 stitches every time you do. So that's the plan. So I'm making use of my knowledge from colorwork socks, because I know short row heels from colorwork socks. They tend to fit me really well, and I know the cuffs tend to fit me really well, and those are never knit in colorwork. They are in stockinette. So if I just do that, I take back that stitch count from my colorwork socks and then go back to my stitch count for stockinette socks outside the cuff and the heel. It's actually working out really well, and I can recommend that if this is something you're struggling with. But it seems to just be me, so I'm just gonna keep on knitting. So last night I thought I was done marking. Turns out there were some in the morning that wasn't quite correctly submitted or something, so submitted as drafts and there shouldn't be blah blah blah. So when I thought I was done marking, I celebrated with a new cast-on. I was like, oh, it was actually after I'd finished the Jurekväll mittens, and I was like, okay, done marking, done with a whole project, it's bedtime, I'm gonna cast on some socks. So I did that, and I've used the Lang yarns that I purchased a while ago to make all the socks from the Tant Ultus socks book, which is the best sock book ever. Just, it's the best. You heard me talk about it before. Tant Ultus socks. She's actually coming out with a mitten book. It's already out in Swedish, but I am eagerly awaiting the English translation, just so that I can read it without going, what's verb? You know, just English is a bit easy for me, even though I'm fairly fluent in understanding Swedish. It just takes a bit more brain power to read it sometimes. So this is the sock I have started. It's the Molly sock. Yeah, I'm actually showing you where the join is. That's not very nice. This is nice. So Pinaguri might recognize the color scheme here, because I may have gotten a tad bit inspired by her color choices. So it's burgundy right up here. Oh, the skeins are gonna fall on the ground now. Anyway, let's get a bit closer. This is burgundy. It's just looking really dark, I'm sorry. And then it's like a grey white, which is like my new favorite shade of white. It's technically grey, but I kind of like it more than a natural white because they're a bit yellow, and I don't like bleached white because they're just kind of glowing. So grey white and then purple. And off we go. It is very loose though. This is kind of too loose for socks really, but this is my leg, and so now I'm gonna get back to my sock nerd talking with you guys again, because again I tend to manipulate the fit of socks with needle size, and that is really the best way I found to do when doing colorwork socks, which these are. They are full-on colorwork socks. You can look up the Tanturto socks book on Ravelry and you will see all the patterns, and you can see where the Molly pattern is. Hopefully I will also have it linked below via my project pages, which is what I usually do. And yeah, so it has a folded brim, hem, what have you, and so I'm supposed to fold that over later and sew it in on the inside like that. And from my experience, when I do that, it tends to get wider and weird but still feel tight, and that's just like, well, how do I work around that? Well, my plan is to sew a bit loose so that doesn't become too tight. But what I also did is actually knit, I cast on 3mm needles to make the cast on loose, and then I immediately started knitting with my 2.5mm needles. And just as I done the knit two together yarn over row here, which is how you get the picots, and knit one round on 2.5, I went up to 2.75, which is my preferred needle size for when I am doing stockinette in a colorwork sock, because that's kind of those two sizes, a 3mm with colorwork and a 2.75 without colorwork, for me it tends to give the same gauge. So that's just kind of how I balance those out. That's why I went up to my 2.75. It tends to fit well for my leg as well. And then I knit the colorwork on 3mm, which is what I have here. So I already used 3 needle size, and I've changed needles 3 times. So start cast on with 3mm, do the inside of this folded brim on 2.5, did the outside in stockinette on 2.75 before I went back to the 3mm for the colorwork. I know, you're just gonna have to do a bit of trial and error to kind of get your preferred size there. But we're not done, I know. Because I'm gonna knit on 3mm down to the short row heel. And for the short row heel, I found it's enough with the 2.75mm needle, because I want it a bit denser, because it's gonna be the heel, it's gonna be worn out. Hopefully not, but you know, it's a heel. We'll hold it double with the kind of extra strand of nylon thread that you get with this yarn. There's a spool in the center that's really brilliant, that you can make the heel and toes a lot more sturdier. And so I'll be doing that on the 2.75, and then I will continue knitting on with the 2.75 for the whole foot, because like I said, the foot will not be pulled over my heel. It can be a lot tighter, and the foot is generally where that matters, you know. The foot is kind of where you want to just be snug. Allows you to have it in your shoe and it won't slip around your feet. And in the end I just do the toes and the same needle size and I'm done. And I'll use the reinforcement thread in the toe as well, of course. There's a lot of changing of needle size when I make my colorwork socks fit. I didn't used to do that, but then I ended up getting either too tight legs or too loose feet. This is just for me and my ratio between my leg and my foot. But I hope this didn't in any way deter you from knitting colorwork socks, because there was a time when I didn't know how to do it, and when my socks ended up being on the tighter side, I could still get them on and they were nice and fitted. It's just a bit hard to get them on, but I could. And when I knit them looser, I ended up with something like this. And I wear these socks all the time. They're knitted in Regia, either self-striping in the cave facette colorway for the striping, and just their solids for the main color, and I wear this to death. Yes, it's way too big. It kind of twirls around my foot and they're dirty and horrible looking, but they are my perfect stay-at-home socks. So they're never pointless if you get them too big, and I'd rather go too big than too small, just so that you can wear them. It's just it's a matter of where and when, and I think for colorwork socks they're more sort of wear at home socks, you know, when you just want to have warm feet as you're sitting and knitting. Yeah, So that was my long socky ranty video. I didn't think this was going to be a sock themed video, but apparently it is. So the next thing on the program is to announce some winners for a giveaway I did last week. And before I do that, can we have a bit of a serious talk? I have a little bit of an issue with participants in my giveaway not necessarily reading all the rules, and that is because my rules may perhaps be a bit unusual, because when I make a giveaway thread, I think about how that thread can be used for more than just a giveaway. I like to create a resource from that, to have everybody who wants to win a pattern pitch in to create something. And so when I ask a question such as what I did now, what is on your wish list, I want to be able to browse through and see all the amazingness, and that's why I said photos are encouraged. And I saw that maybe people didn't read that and didn't see that, so I put it in bold. I was like, photos encouraged, very little photos. So guys, please take care and read the rules. I know I didn't say that you had to use photos, so I can understand why that seemed like an optional thing. It's optional because obviously not everything can be presented as photos. This was a very open giveaway theme, but I feel like I just need to mention it anyway, because in my last giveaway I said I definitely want to see photos, and there still were a lot of cases where there weren't photos. Not links, photos. Obviously you have to link so I can check what it is, but I want it to be a thing where you can just kind of browse through, you know? So please, in the future, if you could pay attention to every aspect of the rules. I make them very, very clear, very concise, so that you don't have to read a whole book to enter, you know, it's supposed to take you a minute. So if that's clear, hope that's not too controversial. Yeah, photos, everybody, we want to see photos. Anyway, I'm going to announce the winners now, because that is just super exciting, and I feel like maybe at least one of these winners have won before, because they sound familiar. Anyway, I'm going to read the winners, because the first pattern I was giving away is the Lily cardigan, and the winner for that was, drumroll, Knittersum. I don't know how to pronounce things. This is a common theme, but it's written, and you won. So just get in touch with me and I will get in touch with Amy that you have won the pattern. And the winner for the Nordic Stars pattern by Amelia is Kita 1984, 1984 if you will. And so you also need to get in touch with me so that I can get in touch with Amelia that you have won this pattern. And that is that. I think we will kind of move on to acquisitions. That is the last bit I have left of this episode, and there are some acquisitions for this week as well. Not yarn, I did good, mostly because I've been busy marking, but let's give me some cred and pretend that there isn't a pile of yarn waiting for me in Norway. I was very, very fortunate to receive a lovely kind of grant a wish or get your wish granted thingy thing that's going on Instagram. It's an awesome thing where you can just kind of grant wishes, and once you've granted some wishes you get to make a wish, and if someone wants to grant that wish, and you know, the ball keeps on rolling. And so she contacted me and said that she could make me a bag that resembled a Fringe Supplier bag, because I very naively, I mean knowingly naively, said, you know, if anyone has a Fringe Supplier bag that'd be nice, but I didn't expect anyone to, because that's ridiculous, that nobody would willingly give one away. But to find someone who would willingly sew me one, that's all the more amazing. So I just gonna show you. I got this piece of amazingness. Look at that fabric. It reminds me of the aprons that we used to sew in kindergarten, like in elementary school, primary school, whatever you call it. We call it children's school in Norway. We're that inventive. Children's school, youth school, and then further school, Norwegian. Anyway, I got this amazing bag, and it looks like a Fringe Supplier bag, but it's got a really, really cool pattern, and it's got shiny silvery details instead. And I just like keep picking it up to like just open it and close it again, because it's like getting me that excited. And I think also this material is a bit more squishable, softer, less firm than the canvas material that people say do soften up with the fringe bags. I'm not here to diss the fringe bags, I'm just saying I can't afford them. This is the inside. It's got this kind of pattern here. I don't know how to pronounce these floral. It's like a damask, is that how you say it? I don't know. And it's lovely red, and you know how I feel about red, so faux Fringe Supplier bag. I am so grateful. Thank you so much. I feel like I've thanked you plenty of times already, but it doesn't hurt repeating, so thank you. I have done a little bit of shopping. I got a bit of a nudge from the Yusola site that they've gotten some more yarn from Rauma, and I'm like, yeah, but I get Rauma yarn in Norway. I'm going to Norway in a week, so I don't need to buy any Rauma yarn. But they were like, but we got the Totra Gammelserie yarn and some more colours now. And I'm like, more colours? That yarn only comes in shades of white, black, brown, red and blue. What are you talking about? And then I looked up the shade card, which is what I ordered, and look at that. They have really expanded their colour range for this yarn. So if you don't know, this yarn is essentially Rauma's kind of high twist take on Finulgarn. And Finulgarn, you know, it's like a wall of yarn. It's like, you know, when you go into a Shetland yarn shop, you see all the Jameson and Jameson Smith yarn. It's kind of like that, but Norwegian. And for some reason, the kind of high twist equivalent of that yarn never had that many colours. So, but now they have a lot more. There is yellow and blue, and there's actually kind of a plummy burgundy going on here. That gets me very excited. And I like the colours. They're very much my shades of these colours. You know, it's a good blue, it's a good green, it's a good yellow, it's a good red and burgundy, and I'm just, yeah, pretty stoked about that. So I have the shade card, and I might pick up some skeins when I'm in Norway. But I had a bit of a browse through the Yusola shop, because it is a pretty excellent online shop. And I have to say, before I get into what I bought, I received it the day after I ordered it. And this is probably the 3rd time this has happened for me. 3 out of 4 times I've actually ordered, which is amazing. Every time they ship it out immediately. And if you order it at a reasonable time of the day, it will be at your mailbox the day after. Presumably if you live in the UK, I might have an advantage of being in London, but London and Edinburgh are far apart, so I am very impressed by that, and I thought that's worth mentioning. But yeah, what I bought was these 2 gorgeous reference books for colorwork charts, for traditional colorwork charts. It's by Sheila McGregor, and this is the traditional Fair Isle knitting book, and this is the traditional Scandinavian knitting book. And it just warms my heart so much that, again, this distinction is made, because this is one of my biggest pet peeves, and long-term viewers will know this. I have issues with referring to all stranded colorworks as Fair Isle, and I know I may sound like I'm just being like a bit picky and difficult, and a lot of people won't tell me like, well, I am English and I know English and I know that this is the name for that technique, and I'm like, actually it isn't. It's the name of the ethnic style of that technique. The technique is called stranded colorwork or stranded knitting. This particular ethnic take on that, the regional take on that, is Fair Isle. That's why the name kind of became the English name for stranded knitting, because it's from part of the UK. So, but that doesn't mean that other nations or areas of the world that also have a stranded knitting tradition should be called Fair Isle, because I'm not too like touchy about that for Scandinavian knitting, but I kind of feel bad for the Baltic tradition, because the Baltic tradition is often one that gets a bit forgotten in the shadow of Fair Isle, and when it gets called Fair Isle it seems a bit unfair, because the Baltic tradition, it's so different and they probably did it first. I think that's the main thing that kind of makes me feel like it's unfair, but more or equally as much I feel like it's unfair to the Fair Isle tradition, because it's such a distinct style. These are very distinct style. You will see in Norwegian or Scandinavian in general, it's generally just 2-colored. It's generally pretty, I'm not going to say boring colors, but they tend to be primary and possibly secondary colors. You know, we don't go very far out there. It's white, it's black, it's red and blue and possibly green. See if I have any examples. I don't think it's not a very well photographed book, but we tend to stick to the same main color and usually also the same contrast color, but we may change the contrast color every so often. Whereas the Fair Isle tradition goes bananas. I mean, they changed everything. They changed the main color and the contrast color at the same time even. They're just kind of all over the place, and that is so different and deserves recognition as being its own thing. So that is kind of why I feel like it's very, very, very important that terminology is used to kind of accurately and respectfully represent all heritage that we have in the knitting traditions. And long rant. I usually kind of finalize these rants that I have every so often, like every other month or so, with saying that if you think I'm just talking bogus, I'm just kind of being difficult, you can look up on Ravelry. There is, you know, you can search up patterns and you can go to the attributes and then you can click colorwork and it will say stranded. It's not going to say Fair Isle, it will say stranded. However, if you go down to regional and ethnic styles, it will say Fair Isle. And I think Ravelry did really well there. Excellent job, Ravelry. I think that's a nice way of clarifying the distinction, because it's not inaccurate to say that Fair Isle patterns are Fair Isle. I think that's totally fine. But yeah, that's all I have for today, and one excellent timing because my battery icon is blinking, and I guess that means I stayed within the hour. That's been a long time since I did, which means I should probably catch up on a lot of things that I haven't covered whilst marking. I hope you're enjoying Vlogmas. Like I said, you know, everything that is covered in Vlogmas that is knitting related is covered here, so as ever, I don't want anyone to feel like they have to catch up with everything and that they will be missing out on anything on the most busy time of year, so do not worry. I just wanted to say thank you for those of you who are watching, and I will see you either in the next episode or in the next Vlogmas video. Bye.